Frank Zappa was never the type to hand out casual compliments. Throughout his career, he critiqued the music world with a razor-sharp tongue, rarely sparing even the bands considered untouchable. That's why one detail has always surprised rock historians. Zappa admired one particular Rolling Stones album, a record that Mick Jagger himself could barely tolerate. The contradiction between these two towering personalities, Zappa the experimental genius and Jagger the ultimate rock frontman, sets the stage for one of the strangest chapters in the Stones' early discography. To understand why Zappa praised it, and why Jagger almost disowned it, we need to go back to the mid-1960s, when the Rolling Stones were still figuring out what kind of band they wanted to be. By the late 60s, Frank Zappa had built a reputation as one of rock's most uncompromising thinkers. He admired innovation, risk-taking, and any artist who dared to break the formula. So, when he complimented the Rolling Stones' 1967 album Between the Buttons, it wasn't because it was the band's biggest or flashiest record. He appreciated its eccentric arrangements, its unconventional structures, and the way it briefly pushed the Stones into a stranger, more experimental direction, one that aligned slightly with his own taste for musical oddity. But while Zappa saw curiosity and creativity, Mick Jagger saw something else entirely. A flawed project that had slipped out of his control. That tension, Zappa celebrating it, Jagger rejecting it, becomes the heart of this story. At the start of their career, the Rolling Stones were far from the self-assured giants they would later become. Brian Jones led the group through deep blues territory, and their early discography was dominated by covers. Even one of their breakthrough hits had come from the Beatles, not their own pen. But everything changed when Mick Jagger and Keith Richards finally emerged as a songwriting team on Aftermath in 1966. That album marked a turning point, the moment they stepped out of the shadow of blues standards and into the realm of original rock innovation. The band was evolving quickly, and then came the project that would divide opinions for decades. Released in 1967, Between the Buttons captured the Rolling Stones in a moment of transition. It was the last chapter of their pop-influenced phase, the final breath of Brian Jones's eclectic instrumental experiments, and the closing act for manager Andrew Loog Oldham's production style. For fans, the album felt playful, stylish, and ahead of its time. For Frank Zappa, it was an intriguing piece of left-field pop, messy, bold, and artistically restless. For Mick Jagger, it was a creative misfire. Recording limitations played a huge role. With only 4 tracks available in the London studio, the band piled overdubs on top of overdubs until the clarity of the performances began to disappear. Jagger felt the album had been smothered by its own production process. What Zappa heard as charmingly chaotic, Jagger heard as sonically damaged. This difference in perception is the key to understanding everything that follows. Years later, when pressed to revisit the album's track list, Jagger struggled to connect with most of the material. He saw it as an experiment in sound, rather than a collection of strong, memorable songs, the exact opposite of what the Stones would soon become famous for. But in that fog of disappointment, there was one song that stood out and remained meaningful to him. For all his criticism of the album, Mick Jagger has repeatedly singled out Ruby Tuesday as the song that survived the chaos. Its graceful melody, melancholic tone, and poetic lyrics rose far above the muddled production surrounding it. It was the one moment on the album that felt timeless, the one track that, in Jagger's view, actually worked. This is where the narrative threads come together. Zappa loved the album's strangeness. Jagger loved only this one piece of beauty inside it. Fans loved the song enough for it to become a future classic. Ruby Tuesday became the escape hatch, the track that outlived its parent album and continued to resonate long after the rest of Between the Buttons faded into obscurity. The divide between their perspectives reveals something crucial about both artists. Zappa valued experimentation, even when messy. Jagger valued impact, clarity, and songs built to last. The album fell directly between those values. To Zappa, Between the Buttons had personality. A willingness to break structure and treat pop music like a playground. To Jagger, the album lacked cohesion and strength, overshadowed by technical limitations and rushed decisions. Ironically, both men were right. Today, Between the Buttons occupies a strange space in the Stones' history. Too pop-leaning to stand beside Beggar's Banquet or Let It Bleed, too experimental to be considered early R&B Stones, and too inconsistent to land among their essential works. Yet it remains one of their most discussed albums precisely because of the split between Zappa's admiration and Jagger's dissatisfaction. It's a case study in how art can be interpreted or misinterpreted, depending on what the listener wants from it. For Zappa, it was an intriguing puzzle. For Jagger, it was a creative disappointment. For fans, it became a cult favorite. And in the middle of that debate sits one shining creation, Ruby Tuesday, the song that rose from the wreckage and became one of the timeless pillars of the Rolling Stones' early catalog.